And we're now going to learn about the background commands. Now, before we look at the commands themselves, we need to learn how to create a background scene. Now, Candy Dialog Engine comes with a default background scene. Just go to the CandyDE folder and then the scenes folder, and right here you have the background scenes folder. So open the default scene and let's have a look at it. Now, the background scene is pretty much straightforward. You have a root node, and it can be any node you want. It can be a control node. It could also be a panel container, or really, again, any node you want. And the root node needs to have this script attached, and that's the backgrounds.gd script, which comes with Candy Dialog Engine. The root node also needs a child, which will act as a parent for all the background layer nodes. The way Candy Dialog Engine handles backgrounds, you have multiple layer nodes in your background scene, and each layer node can be used to display a background image. And these layer nodes are the ones here with numbers instead of names. And these layer nodes must all be located under the same parent. And in the case of the default scene, that parent is BG control. So when you create a background scene, the script attached to the root node comes with this exported variable here, BG container, and you need to assign the parent of the background layer nodes to BG container. As you can see here, BG control is assigned to BG container, and that tells Candy Dialog Engine where it can find the background layer nodes. Now, as for the layer nodes themselves, you have multiple options. You can use a texture rectangle, you can use a texture button, you can also use a 9-patch rectangle if you'd like. You can use a Sprite 2D or even perhaps a Sprite 3D. You can use an animated Sprite 2D or animated Sprite 3D. And you can use a video stream player node for video layers. And as for the names, you can name your layer nodes anything you want. In this case, the default scene has the nodes named with numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but you don't have to assign numbers as the names. Again, the names can be whatever you want. You have complete freedom. And of course, you can mix different types of nodes for the layer nodes, or you could make all the nodes the same type of node. For example, well, in the default scene, there's a bunch of different nodes because the default scene is trying to show you what's possible, what options are available. But if you want to use only texture rectangles for your layers, you can do that. So with that done, let's now look at the background commands. The first command is bg scene, and this command will load a background scene in your dialog UI. So for example here, if I have a dialog running inside Candy UI and I use the background command, it's going to load a background scene here. And you need to load a background scene before you can actually display background images, obviously. Now, configuring the background scene command is very easy. You just need to indicate which scene you want to load. And if you click here, Candy Dialog Engine is going to list all the background scenes available. It's going to read those scenes from the background scenes folder. So as long as your background scenes are located in this folder, and they have to be in this folder to be loaded, then Candy Dialog Creator can list them, and you can just select the scene that you want to instantiate. So there you go, just like that, this is going to load the default scene. Now, you can only have one background scene loaded at a time in your dialog UI. So if I run a second background scene command, and let's say I load, let's imagine that I load this scene. It doesn't exist, but let's pretend this scene exists in my project. The first scene here, default, it's going to be unloaded. It's going to be deleted. And then this scene is going to be loaded in place of it. Or if you just want to unload a scene without loading a new one, you can just leave the scene field empty. And if this is empty, Candy Dialog Engine will delete the background scene that's loaded in your dialog UI. Now, once you've loaded a background scene, you will want to actually display background images, and you can do this with the BG layer command, or just BG. Now, this is fairly straightforward. You first need to select a layer node that you want to use to display an image. And as a reminder, these are the layer nodes here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I just need to specify in which node I want to load an image. And for example, well, you could type the name, or you could use the menu. And look at this. The menu here has multiple options. It lists all your background scenes, and if you hover over a scene, it shows you all the layer nodes in that scene. So that's pretty convenient. And if you don't know which scene you're going to use, you can hover all, and this is listing all the layer nodes in all of your background scenes. Now in this case, both of my scenes have the same nodes, so all is listing the same nodes as well. But if my scenes had different nodes, then all the nodes would be listed here under all. Alright, so I'm just going to select node 1. Next, you need to select the file that you want to load and display as a background inside this node. And if you click here, it shows you a list of the files that are available for that specific node. And if you hover the files, you can look at a preview, so you can make sure you're selecting the correct file. Now, we need to understand how files are organized here in our project folder. So go to the CandyDE folder, and then to the media folder, and then the general folder. And here, go to the backgrounds folder. And notice here I have these folders 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You need a folder for each layer node. So if one of your background scenes has a layer node called AAA, you need a folder called AAA as well. And any images that you want to load inside AAA, you have to place them inside this folder. So notice here, if I go to the folder named 1, I have this image. And that means I can load this image inside any layer node named 1. And it doesn't matter which scene the node belongs to. I can have a node named 1 in multiple background scenes. Any layer node named 1 can access and load this image. So here in my BG command, I'm going to select the image file. It's the only one I have. And, well, that's it. If I'm just displaying a static image, that's all I need to do. So let me just add a line here for testing purposes so the dialog does not end immediately. And let's see what happens when we run this dialog. And there we go. The background is displaying. Now, when I press Dialog Advance, notice dialog has ended, but the background is still visible. And let me explain why that is very quickly. If you go back to your Dialog UI scene and select the root node, and in the inspector you have the backgrounds category here, and you have this variable persistent bg on end, and if this is enabled, the backgrounds will not be removed when dialog ends. But if you want the background to disappear when dialog ends, just untick this, and let's see what happens now. If I press Dialog Advance, dialog ends, and the background disappears. So this option is very useful for cases where you want backgrounds to remain persistent even when the dialog has ended. This might be the case in some 2D games, or perhaps in some visual novels, or, puzzle games or whatever. And now let's look at the mirror command. As you can probably guess, it flips a background image on its horizontal or vertical axis. And all you need to do is select which layer node you want to target. So I'm going to target layer node named 1. And then you need to select which axis you want to flip on. And you can flip on the horizontal axis, vertical axis, both axes at once, or you can simply reset to the default values for both axes. Now I'm just going to flip it on the horizontal axis, and I'm going to add one more test line. There we go, and now let's see what happens. Okay, now look closely. When I advance, the background is going to flip. There we go. It was mirrored. Now, there's one important limitation to the mirror command. It only works on nodes that have the flip H and flip V properties. So it works on texture rectangles, it works on texture buttons, and it works on sprites and animated sprites, but it will not work on video stream player nodes. So just keep that limitation in mind, and in the future, if we can think of a way to support video stream players, we will add this. Now let's go back to our BG layer command and let's learn about animations. If you remember, our background scene has this node 3 here, which is a sprite 2D node, and sprites can be easily animated. So we're going to do just this. I'm going to select node 3, and here I'm going to select this file, which is a bouncing ball. Now it's a bit big here in the preview, but that's just my settings, so let me just fix this quickly. And there we go. Now it's smaller, I can see it fully. Okay. Now here I need to select how many times I want the animation to play. And well, I could disable the animation by setting it to 0, or I could make the animation play indefinitely by setting it to -1. If I disable it, the animation will simply pause on the first frame. So the sprite will be visible, but it won't be animated. Now I'm just going to set it to infinite because the purpose here is to show you how animations work. So let's test it. And here we go, we have the animation playing here. You can see the ball bouncing. Great. Now, something I want to mention is that this bouncing ball is considered a background layer. Now, notice how Alice immediately spoke when dialogue started. Well, you can make dialogue pause during the animation if you'd like. And I mentioned those data fields before when I talked about the media commands and several other commands, wait time and wait loops. And in wait loops, you can specify a number of animation loops the dialogue should pause for. So if I write 5 here, dialogue will pause until the animation has played 5 times, and then dialogue will resume. So let's see it in action. See, Alice is not talking right away, and once the ball will have completed 5 animation cycles, dialogue will continue and Alice speaks. Okay. Another option is to specify an amount of time that we want the dialogue to pause for. And here I could set 5 seconds. And let me just set the wait loops to 0 because I don't want to pause dialogue for any wait loops. I only want to pause for 5 seconds. After 5 seconds, dialogue continues and Alice speaks. And just so you know, time and loops are cumulative. So if I write 5 here and 5 here, dialogue will pause until 5 animation loops have played, and also until 5 seconds into the 6th loop. Now, this is very important. Think of time as a timestamp within a loop. So, for example, here, it's going to play 5 loops, and then, during the 6th loop, it's going to wait 5 more seconds. So let's test it, and you will notice that it's going to take longer than earlier for Alice to speak. There you go. Okay, so I think that should tell you how animations work. Now, you have another option for animated backgrounds. You can use an animated sprite 2D or 3D. And animated sprites require not an image, but a sprite frames resource. So you need to provide sprite frame resources here inside the sprite frames folder. So just create a sprite frames resource and save it here in this folder, sprite frames, inside whichever background layer you want to use. And here you would provide the name of the sprite frame resource. I don't remember if it's tres or just res, but you would provide the sprite frame resource as the file. And sprite frames resources have animations inside of them, and each animation has a name. So you would then provide the name of the animation to play. For example, bounce. Now, I don't have an actual sprite frames resource, so I can't show you an actual example, but this is how it would work for animated sprites. And as I mentioned before, you also have the option of using a video stream player node, and in that case, you would provide the video as the file to play. Make sure it's in the correct layer folder, and there's also an option to play animations on texture rectangles and texture buttons. However, I'm not going to talk about it here because, first of all, it's a little bit advanced for this video, and second, this feature is considered experimental at this point. It has performance issues we're not happy about. It works, but the performance is not very good, especially with backgrounds, because backgrounds tend to be big images that take up the entire screen. They're very big files that use up a lot of memory. So our current code for animating texture rectangles is really not optimized properly. So that's another reason I'm not going to talk about this feature. We're going to rework the code. We have some ideas to optimize it. We just decided to take care of that after releasing version 1.1. But we will likely fix it in the near future. Now, if you've watched this part of the video that discussed media commands, you should already be familiar with the wait and stop commands, because you might remember we have a video wait command and we have a video stop command, and here we have background wait and background stop commands. Now I'm going to talk about the background wait command. And the background wait command, it basically does the same thing that I just showed you here with wait time and wait loops. But I'm just going to show it to you anyway, plus this gives me the opportunity to test it one last time, make sure it's actually working the way it should. So here I just need to specify which node the command is supposed to target. And remember, my ball animation is playing on node 3, so I need to target node 3 with the wait command. And here it's the same as before. I can specify a number of loops and an amount of time I want to wait. So let's test the loops right now, see what happens. Okay, it's waiting, and after 5 animation loops, dialogue continues, Alice talks. Now let's test the time. We're gonna do 5 seconds, set the wait loops to 0, and let's check it out. So yeah, after 5 seconds, dialogue continues, and yeah, so that works. That works. Okay, the wait command works. That's good. Now, let's see the stop command. Now here, I'm gonna add a stop command after Alice has spoken. And I'm going to remove the wait command because I don't need to wait anymore. And here for the stop command, I just need to specify which node to target. So again, node 3. And here I need to select which frame I want the video to pause on when it stops. That means if I select the value 0, the node is going to freeze where it is right now when it stops. On the other hand, if I select 1, it's going to reset to the first frame. You know, I'm going to use 0. I want to freeze on the current frame. So let's test it, and actually I'm going to make Alice say something here as well. Okay. Okay, so Alice speaks. You can see the animation playing behind the dialog box. It's partially hidden, but you can see the ball bouncing. And now when I press dialog advance, the animation should stop on whatever frame it's on. And there we go. It stopped and Alice is saying test 2. So that worked. Now let's just try resetting to the first frame. So this time I'm gonna continue when the ball is in the air, and it should reset back to the first frame, which is on the ground. So let's go. And there you go. You probably saw the ball teleporting back to the ground when I pressed dialog continue. So it worked. It reset to the first frame. Great. And now let's try the dialog remove command. And dialog remove is just going to clear a background layer node. It's going to remove the image. So all you need to do is select the layer node you want to target. And, well, let me just add one more line for Alice. Test 3. And okay, so I'm gonna press continue. The animation stopped, and now I'm gonna press continue again, and the ball should disappear entirely. And yeah, it disappeared. That's what the BG remove command does. It removes the image. Okay, now we're going to learn about the BG effect command, and the BG effect command plays animations on our background layer nodes. Now, I need a background layer command, and I'm going to configure it to use layer node 2, and I will assign this file to layer node 2. And it's not animated, so I don't need loops or anything else. Now, we need to have a look at node 2. It's a texture button, which isn't very important. It just means I could make it clickable if I wanted to. And it has an animation player. And this animation player has 2 animations that I created, 3 if you count reset. Now, in order to play animations, I need to select the node that's going to be targeted, and I need to provide an animation library. And if you're a beginner in Godot, you may not know how to create an animation library, so let me show you quickly. Select an animation player, and make sure you have some animations inside of it. And then click the animation button here, and click Manage Animations. And here, it's going to list the animations inside of it. Just go here, where it says Global, and click the disk icon, and then Save As. And then you need to go to the Media General Backgrounds folder, and here we have the folders for our layer nodes, and we need to go here in the Animation Libraries folder. And you just need to give a name to your animation library. I'm gonna call mine AL_1. AL for Animation Library 1. Click Save and OK to close the window, and there we go. I have now created my animation library in my project resources right here. Okay. Next, go back to the Candy Dialog Creator And make sure you click this button here that looks like a snowflake to rescan your project resources. Anytime you add new resources in your project folders, you need to rescan manually. So make sure you remember to do this. And now Candy Dialog Creator can show me my animation libraries. You can see my library is right here in the list, so I'm going to select it. And then I can select an animation or an effect that I want to play. And you can see here I have my animations from my library. And I'm going to select Cloud Move. And for loops, I want the animation to loop indefinitely, so I'm going to set it to -1. And that means loop forever. I don't need any wait, anything, so I don't want dialog to wait for the animation to play several times. Dialog can continue right away, so I'm not going to do anything for wait time and wait loops. Okay, so with all of that set up, let's do a test export and go back to Godot and test our dialog. And you can see the cloud above animating. That's our cloud on layer node 2, and the movement is actually the animation. Let me show you in my scene here. You can see here, this is layer node 2, this rectangle here. It's small. And here I have my animation. And, well, let's see if it shows. I'm going to play it. There we go. See this? Let me play it again. There you go. And then it just keeps repeating because we set loops to -1. So in the game, we get the cloud constantly moving. Now it's moving a bit fast, I'm aware of that. I should have made it slower. Doesn't matter. The video is just for demonstration purposes. Okay. Now, something I want to mention here, you don't actually have to give all your layer nodes an animation player. Candy Dialog Engine, when you use the background effect command, it's going to look for an animation player that is not busy playing an animation. And if there's no animation player, or if all the animation players for a node are already playing an animation, Candy Dialog Engine will create a new animation player. And it's going to load the animation library in that new player so it can play the animation we want. Okay. Let me show you here. I'm going to duplicate this command, but I'm going to make it play the fade animation. Or actually, I don't even need to duplicate the command. I can make the command play multiple animations. That's right. If you want to play multiple animations from the same library, Candy Dialog Engine can handle it. So let's test it. And there we go. The cloud is moving, and it's also blinking or fading at the same time. Again, both the movement and the fade are very quick, but you should be able to see them. And just to show you, here I'm going to use the BG effect twice to play both effects. So the first BG effect will play Cloud Move, and immediately after, the second BG effect will play Fade, and you will notice that this also works. So when you want to play multiple effects at the same time from the same animation library, you don't have to use the same command necessarily. I could start the cloud move effect, and then a character could say something or some other commands could run, and after that I would play the fade effect in addition to the cloud move effect. That would be perfectly fine. Now let's just quickly talk about making dialogue wait during animations. So here in the BG effect command, you could make dialogue wait for a certain amount of loops and also for a certain amount of time. Note that the two are cumulative. So here, if I have wait loops 1 and wait time 5, dialogue would pause until all the animations have played one loop and 5 additional seconds. Now I'm just gonna configure it to play one loop, and pay attention because it's going to wait for all the animations to play one loop. And fade lasts 1 second, but cloud move lasts 3 seconds. So you'll notice that dialogue only resumes after the cloud has completed one full loop. Look at this. The cloud is fading, but dialogue only continues when move has finished one loop. So there we go. This is the standard behavior for wait time and wait loops across all commands in Candy Dialog Engine, by the way. So if you watched the parts of this video on media commands or several other commands that use wait time and wait loops, it works the same. Now you also have the effect wait command, and here you just select a layer node to target, and then you can select effects that you want to wait on. Now you're gonna have to provide the effects by hand because the command has no idea which animation library you're using. So yeah, that means you can copy the effects from the BG effect command and paste them here, or you just have to type them by hand. So here, let's say I want to wait one loop on both of these animations. And just to be clear, in BG effect, I set wait time and wait loops to 0. So only effect wait is going to pause the dialogue. So let's see what happens. It should be the same as before. Dialogue will resume when the cloud move animation has finished one loop. Okay, that worked. But now, just to show you, I'm gonna wait on fade only. I'm not gonna wait on cloud move. So let's see it at work. See, the dialogue resumed as soon as fade completed one loop. It didn't wait for cloud move to complete a loop this time. Okay, so this can be very convenient. And finally, you have the BG effect stop command, and here it's the same thing. You select a layer node, and then you select an effect that you want to stop. And I'm going to stop fade. So here's what's going to happen. The cloud is going to move and fade. And BG effect will pause dialogue until fade has completed one loop. And then dialogue is going to resume, and it's going to stop the fade animation. So you should see the cloud fading only once instead of fading continuously. And there you go. The cloud faded or blinked only once. Let's watch it again if you missed it. See? So yeah, you can stop one or more animations here if you want. I can stop all of them if I want to. Let me just show you. There we go. And just in case you're wondering, why did the cloud disappear? It's not that the effect stop command made the cloud actually disappear. It didn't remove the cloud image from the layer node. It's just that it reset the animation to the first frame. And if you remember, the first frame is off screen. Right, let me just assign the cloud image so you can understand what's going on. So see here, we have our move animation, and when we play, the cloud moves across the screen. And here, what happened is it reset. So it teleported back here off screen, and that's why it looked like it disappeared. But it didn't make it invisible, it didn't delete the node, it did not remove the image from the node. The cloud is still there, it's just to the side of the screen. Okay, now we're going to talk about visual novel commands. Visual novel commands are very similar to background commands, and I'm going to assume that you have watched the previous part of this video on background commands. If you haven't watched the part on background commands, please do so because I will be making references to it. First, let's have a look at the visual novel scenes. Go to your scenes folder and then your VN scenes folder, and here you have a scene called default. And if we open it, notice that it looks quite similar to the background scene. A visual novel or bust scene has multiple nodes which are used for displaying character busts. And these nodes can be texture rectangles, 9-patch rectangles, texture buttons, Sprite 2D and Sprite 3D, animated Sprite 2D and animated Sprite 3D, and video stream players. In the default scene, all the background nodes are texture buttons. And a background scene needs a parent node for all the bust nodes. So here, busts control is the parent for all the bust nodes. And the bust nodes are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And you need to indicate which node is supposed to be the parent for the bust nodes, and you do this here. Select the root node, busts, and here in the inspector you have this variable, bust container, so provide the busts control node here, like this. And you can otherwise customize the scene however you like. The important rule is that you have this node that acts as a parent for the bust nodes. Now let's look at the commands themselves. First we have the vnscene command, and if you remember, it's similar to the bgscene command, which loads a visual novel scene. So here in the scene data field, just select the scene that you want to load, because we need to have a loaded visual novel scene if we want visual novel commands to run. So right here, the vnscene command, it's going to load this visual novel scene, and if the dialog runs inside Candy UI, it's going to instantiate the visual novel scene here as a child of Candy UI. So this is straightforward, and again it's identical to the bgscene command that I explained earlier. If you load another visual novel scene, it's going to replace the first one. So here, Candy Dialog Engine would load this scene first, And then when the second vnscene command runs, it's going to delete this instance and it will load this one. So it will replace the previous visual novel scene that we loaded. If you want to simply delete the visual novel scene without replacing it, just use the vnscene command and leave the scene field empty. And this will tell Candy Dialog Engine to just delete the previous scene without loading a new one. Next, we have the vnbust command, and this command is used for assigning images to our bust nodes. So if we go back to our vnscene, here I have a bust node, and this command vnbust is going to assign an image to it. If I select bust node 1, I can select any bust node, of course, and notice how my bust nodes are spread out across the scene. Each bust node has its own position, so I can easily choose where I want a character to be displayed during the dialogue. For example, if I want a character to be displayed on the left side of the screen, I could use node 1 or 2. And if I want a character to display in the center, I could use node 5, and so on. Also, note that you can move the nodes wherever you want. You can add as many as you want. You can remove some of them if you don't need that many. And yeah, they can be positioned anywhere. They can have any size you want. You're entirely free to design your scene however you want it to be. Now, to configure the vnbust command, the first thing I need to do is select which node I want to assign a bust image to. And here, if I click the list, I can see all the different VN scenes that I have. So this way I can easily select a bust node in whichever scene I'm planning to use. So I'm going to select node 4. And next I need to select an actor reference, because this is how visual novel commands work. You don't simply assign an image to a bust node, you actually start by assigning an actor to a bust node. So here I'm going to assign Nakoto to bust 4. And Candy Dialog Engine is going to remember that Nakoto is assigned to bust 4, so later in other visual novel commands I can just reference Nakoto and I don't have to remember which bust she's assigned to. So that's going to make things a lot easier, because you'll see when I want to animate this actor, or I want to move the actor to another node, or I want to remove the actor from the scene, I don't need to know what bust node the actor is assigned to. I can just refer to the actor and Candy Dialog Engine will figure out what node the actor is currently displayed on. So, okay, so I've selected a node, I've selected an actor to assign, and now I need to select a bust file that I want to assign. And if I click here, I can see all the bust images I have for the character. Now, they're a little bit small, so let me just make them bigger. And here it is. Bust preview width. This changes the size of the preview for visual novel bust files. Now I can see my file much better. So for Nakoto I have 3 different files and I can just pick whichever I want. I'm just going to go with default for now, like that. Now you might be wondering, where should you place the image files for character busts? And well, let me show you. Go to your Godot project folder and then to the CandyDE folder, and then the media folder, the characters folder, and here you have the busts folder. And in the busts folder, you need a folder for each actor. And as an example, if I select Elena's folder, then inside her folder, this is where I would place the image files to use as a visual novel bust. Okay, so right now, if we're just displaying a static image, not an animated image, that's all we need to do. Select a bust node to use, provide an actor reference, and then select the actual image file to display. Now, before testing this dialog, I'm going to do two things. First, I'm going to add a background scene and a background layer. And usually when you're doing a visual novel, you don't simply display character busts, you very often also display and modify backgrounds. So I'm just going to select a background scene, and here I'm going to display a background image like this. Okay. And let me just add a spoken line. Okay, now before we can actually test our visual novel commands, there's one more thing we need to do. We have to go to our dialog UI and select the root node, for example Candy UI, and here in the inspector we need to go to the visual novel mode section right here. And we have this variable here, VN mode, and we need to enable it. This variable will allow Candy Dialog Engine to process the visual novel commands. If this is not enabled, the visual novel commands will not do anything. They will pretty much be skipped. So, okay, now let's do a test. And there we go. We can see Nakoto's image being displayed, and we have our background, we have the dialog box at the bottom. And of course, keep in mind, you can customize everything. You could make the dialog box smaller, wider, you can make it more transparent if you like. And as for the character busts, you can move them, you can position them higher on the screen, you can scale them bigger, anything you like. Now, let's talk about animating busts. If you use a sprite or an animated sprite node, busts can actually play an animation. And let me show you here in my scene. I changed node 5 to a sprite 2D, and I positioned it here in the center of the screen. Now, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to select node 5, and I'm going to assign the actor ball to the node. And I'm going to play this animation. Now here, for loops, I need to select how many loops I want the animation to play. First, let me set it to 0, and this will make the animation pause on the first frame. So the animation is not going to play. Even though this is a sprite sheet here, it's not going to animate. So let's see it. There we go. You can see the ball is not moving. So let's go back to the Candy Dialog Creator, and now I'm going to make the ball animate indefinitely. And there it is. It's repeating the animation forever. I will need to use a command to stop it later. And of course, you know, if you select, let's say 5, it's going to play the animation 5 times. So let's just see it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it stopped. So yeah, Now, what about animated sprite 2D or 3D nodes? Well, let's see. Here I changed node 6 to an animated sprite 2D node. And if you're a beginner in Godot or you just never used animated sprite nodes, they require a sprite frames resource. And this is basically a file that contains sprite sheets where each sprite sheet is an animation. Um, and, well, basically, each animation has its own name, and you can specify which animation to play by using that name. Okay, it's a Godot thing, so if you really want to learn about it, I suggest you find some tutorials or read the Godot documentation. Anyway, the important thing is you need to provide a sprite frame resource to load. So I created a fake sprite frame resource. It's empty, it doesn't have any sprite frames, but there it is. Okay, now where is the sprite frame resource file located? Well, here I'm inside the busts folder, and I have the ball folder, and here you need this folder, sprite frames, and make sure it's named exactly like this, sprite frames with an underscore, and make sure the two words are capitalized. Name it exactly like this. And inside, you can place as many sprite frame resource files as you want. Okay, and here, Candy Dialog Creator, if the actor has sprite frame resources, it's going to list them here. And what I could do here is select my sprite frame resource. Select the one you want to load if you have multiple of them. And next, provide the name of the animation you want to play. So let's imagine I have an animation called Bounce. So I would write Bounce. And then I would write how many loops to play it for. And loops works the same. If I write 5, it plays the animation 5 times. If I write -1, it plays the animation forever. And if I write 0, it pauses on the first frame of the animation. Okay, so this is how you do it with animated sprite nodes and sprite frame resources. I can't show you because this is not an actual sprite frame resource. It does not contain frames. So yeah, there's nothing to show on screen, but this is how you configure the vnbust command. Now, let's learn some more options for managing character busts. So here I configured my vnbust node to display Nakoto's default bust image once again. And Nakoto is going to ask, "Who are you?" And then we want her to display a different image. So how can we do this? Well, we add the vnbust command again. And we provide Nakoto as a reference, and we provide a different image for the bust file. And notice I'm not providing a bust node this time. That's because my first vnbust command has already associated Nakoto to node 4. So when Dialog reaches the second bust command, it already knows that Nakoto is assigned to bust node 4, and we don't need to tell Candy Dialog Engine which node to use anymore. Okay, so let's do it, and let me just add some text so Dialog doesn't end immediately. Export, and now we're gonna test it. Okay, so Nakoto is asking, "Who are you?" And when I continue, notice her image has changed. So it worked. This is how you can change an image, and of course you can configure an animation if you want to, and if you're using a sprite sheet. Great. Now, what if we want to move a character to another bust? Because, let's say we want Nakoto to move to another place on the screen. Well, let me just delete the second vnbust command, and I'm going to replace it with the vnmove command. And the vnmove command lets me move a character to another bust node. So here I simply provide a character reference. I want to move Nakoto, and here I provide the node that I want to move her to, and I will move her to node 8, just like that. Alright, so let's test this. So Nakoto is here near the center of the screen, and when I press Dialog Advance, she will move to the right of the screen. So pay attention, and there it is, she moved. Very simple, right? So yeah, that's how you move a character that's already on screen. Provide the name and just specify which node you want to move the character to. That's it. Awesome. Something you should know is that the vnmove command actually preserves animations. Let me show you. I'm going to select node 5 here again, and I will assign ball. There it is. I can delete this because it's not required. And I'm going to make the animation play indefinitely. And here I will move ball to node 7. So now let's test it. We're going to display the ball, and it's going to be bouncing, and then we're going to move it. And you will notice the animation does not get interrupted. Okay, so when I press Dialog Advance, the ball will move to the left of the screen. Watch closely. And the animation was not interrupted. Now, while we have an animation configured, let's look at the bust stop command. And the purpose of the bust stop command is to stop animation. So here you just need to provide an actor reference again. So I'm going to provide ball. And here I need to indicate which frame I want to stop on. And I have multiple options here. I can provide -1 if I want to stop on the last frame, or I can provide 0 if I want to stop on the current frame. The current frame is whatever the animation is on when the bust stop command runs. So it could be any frame, it depends when the command here runs. Or if I want to stop on a specific frame, for example the first frame, I can write 1. If I want to stop on frame 12, I can write 12, and so on. I'm gonna write 0, and I will try to stop when the ball is in the air. Okay, let's test it. So the ball is animated, and as soon as I press Dialog Advance, it's going to stop. So let's try to stop it when it's in the air, so you can see it's actually stopping on whichever frame the animation is on when the stop command runs. Okay, I missed it. Let's try again. The animation is a bit fast, so I'm not going to try too many times. Yeah, it's a bit higher this time, I think. Anyway, yeah, you should be able to see that it stops whenever I press. So, yeah, that's how the animation stop command runs. And, well, let me stop on the first frame this time, just to show you how it works. So right now it doesn't matter when I press advance, it's gonna reset to the first frame as soon as it stops. See, that's the first frame. So yeah, that's the bus stop command for you. It stops animations. And you can provide multiple actor references if you want to stop multiple animations at once. And now let's learn about the VN mirror command. It's the same as the BG mirror command. It simply flips a bus node horizontally or vertically. And all you need to do here is provide an actor reference. You can provide multiple actor references if you want to, you can provide multiple actor references if you want to flip multiple bus nodes. And here you provide the axis you want to flip on. And you have several options. You can flip on the horizontal axis. On the vertical axis, that's going to make the node upside down. You can flip on both axes at the same time, or you can reset the axes to their default values. And here I'm just going to flip on the horizontal axis. And yeah, let's test it. So we have Nakoto, and as soon as I press dialog advance, she gets mirrored. And as I mentioned, you can flip on the vertical axis if you'd like. That works as well. There you go. And yeah, and as I mentioned, you can flip on both axes or just reset. I'm not going to show all of them to you, but yeah, they work. And finally, we have the VN remove command, and this one just removes an actor from a bus node. So all you need to do is specify which actor you want to remove to the scene. So yeah, okay. So this is going to remove Nakoto. It's very straightforward, and you can remove multiple actors at the same time if you provide multiple references. That works as well. But let's just test this. Okay, so when I press dialog advance, she's gonna disappear. There we go. So yeah, now you need to understand something here. Let's say that I want to re-add Nakoto. Okay. Here, I need to provide a bus node again, because Nakoto was fully removed from the scene. She's no longer assigned to any bus node. If I do this without a bus node, Candy Dialog Engine doesn't know which node Nakoto should be displayed in. Okay, so just remember that when you use the VN remove command, it completely removes the actor from the scene. So when you add the actor again, you have to provide a bus node again. Candy Dialog Engine does not remember the last node the actor was assigned to. Now, I didn't explain what wait time and wait loops do, and that's because I've already explained it in the previous section of the video on background commands. So if you haven't watched the background commands, please do so, and it explains how to use wait time and wait loops to make dialogue pause while an animation is playing. So I'm not going to show it again because it would just be a waste of time. And notice that there's a VN bust wait command, which also makes dialogue pause while an animation is playing, and it can make dialogue pause while multiple animations are playing. Again, watch the previous section of the video on background commands because it's identical. Now, before we continue, let's look at a few settings. First, in the visual novel scene, we have a few exported variables here, and these might be important. Here you have Sprite FPS, and this is the frames per second at which to play sprite animations. FPS means frames per second, so that's going to be the speed of our animations. Let me show you a quick demonstration. If I set the FPS to 10, it's going to be 3 times slower than it was before. I'm sure you remember the ball was bouncing fast before, now it's bouncing a lot slower. So yeah, you can configure the FPS for each scene specifically. And next you have the bust sizes dictionary. Now this is used for sprites as well, because you see sprites don't have an actual size. If you look at this here, the texture button, you have the layout variables, and here under transform you have a size. You can give your texture button a size, or texture rectangles can have a size, but sprites do not have variables for size. Instead they have variables for scale, and I don't quite remember. Yes, here they are. See, there's no size, there's just scale. And it can be complicated for you to calculate at which scale you need to set your sprite node to display your bust images correctly the way you want them to. So this is what this dictionary is for. It's super helpful. Let's say here I have my sprite node called 5, then in the dictionary I need to make sure that there's a key for node named 5. It's right here, and here I can provide the size that I want the sprite to be scaled to. So Candy Dialog Engine will calculate the correct scale for the sprite so it displays at this size. Okay, so if I change this, let's say I do, instead of making it a rectangle, I'm going to do it like this, and now I play my scene again, and notice that the ball is much smaller, right? So I didn't need to give myself a headache trying to figure the scale that I need. I simply provided the size that I wanted right here, and it calculated the correct scale for me. Okay, if you rename the nodes or you add more nodes, make sure you add keys to the dictionaries. But again, this is only for sprite nodes and animated sprite nodes. Okay, other nodes don't need this. And another setting we need to know about, well, there's a bunch of settings here. We're not going to talk about everything. I'm going to talk about some of these later. Now let's go to the Candy UI again, or whatever your dialog UI is. And here, under Visual Novel Mode, you have persistent busts on end. And I talked about this in the background part of this video. If you have this off, when dialogue ends, the character busts will be removed. But if you set it to on, the character busts will remain when the dialogue ends. And in some games, you may want the character busts to remain on screen when dialogue ends and until a new dialogue starts. Okay, so that's also something you can do. That's also an option. Let me give you a quick demonstration. I'm going to disable persistent busts, and I'm going to play the dialogue until the end. So when I press dialogue advance, dialogue is going to end. And notice the character bust disappeared, right? Because here we have persistent busts disabled. Now let's enable it, and let's test it again. And now when dialogue ends, the busts remain on screen. Okay, so yeah, that's also an option you have. Let's talk about the VNEffect commands. You can use the VNEffect command to play an animation on a bust node. And all you need to do is provide a reference to the character you want to play an animation on. And then you're going to have to provide an animation library to use and the animation effects you want to play. Now, in this case, we're not talking about sprite animations. We are talking about animations made with an animation player. Now, here, for Node 4, I have an animation player, and I created an animation here called hop. And if you look at it, it's going to cause the bust node to jump up. Now, first we need to create an animation library. And for that, you click here on the animation button and then on manage animations. And you need to click the disk icon here at the top to save the animation library. Select Save As, and you need to go to your media folder, characters folder, busts, and then you need to save to a folder called animation underscore libraries, like this, and make sure you use capitalization for each word, and don't forget the underscore. Okay, this is the folder. That's how it needs to be named. And here you can name your animation library anything you want. I'm gonna call it VN library 1 and save, and then here click OK to close the window and go back to Candy Dialog Creator. Make sure you rescan your project resources to find the new animation library or any other new files or any other new resource files. And now here we can select the animation library we just created. And then we need to select an animation to play. And Candy Dialog Creator will read the animations inside this library. So, you know, here we have two animations, fade and hop. So you can play both at the same time if you'd like. That's perfectly fine. So let me show you what it looks like. So when I press Dialog Advance, Nakoto here is going to jump and she's going to briefly fade in and out. There we go. That's two animations at once. Now, how does it work? Well, here for Node 4, I have an animation player, but since I played two animations at the same time, Candy Dialog Engine needed two animation players. So it used this animation player for hopping, and it created a second animation player for the fade animation. Okay, so you don't have to create the animation players in advance. Candy Dialog Engine is going to create the animation players it needs. if it needs to play an animation, it first tries to reuse one of the existing animation players. However, if there's not animation players available, or if some of the animation players are already busy playing animations, Candy Dialog Engine simply creates more as needed. So let me show you. If I delete this animation player and I play the scene again, see, the animation still works because Candy Dialog Engine created 2 animation players, one for each animation. So yeah, you don't have to worry about that. You just need to indicate which character you want to play the animation on, select the library, and indicate which animations you want to actually play. Now here you have your loops data field to indicate how many times the animation should play. Again, look at the background command section of this video for information because it's identical to the BG effect command. You have your wait time and wait loops, and then you have the VN effect wait command. Again, here you provide an actor like Nakoto. You indicate which effects to wait on. You can provide one effect or multiple effects. That's up to you. And then again here, wait time, wait loops. Again, for that, look at the background command section of this video because it's identical to the BG effect wait command. And you have the VN effect stop command to stop the effects. And here you provide the actors you want to stop animations on, and you provide the effects or animations you want to stop. And once more, this is identical to the BG effect stop command. So watch this part of the video about background commands. And yeah, so that's it for the visual novel commands. But now there's a few more things I want to mention regarding visual novel features in Candy Dialog Engine. So now let's talk about the JML animations. And JML stands for Join, Move, Leave. And these are animations that play automatically when a character joins the scene, moves to a different bus node, or leaves the scene. Now, there's a few things you need to set up for this to work. First, every node that is expected to play a JML animation needs an animation player called JML. Okay, and you need to manually add the JML player. Now, if you want to name your animation player something else, you can. You can name your animation players anything you want. However, make sure you update this variable here. Go to the root node of the bust scene, and in the inspector JML player name, make sure you write the name of your JML players. And all your JML players need to have the same name. So, you know, if I wanted to rename my players to this, first I would need to rename all of my players. Okay, and then I would have to write this here. Okay, now I'm just gonna undo this because that's not what I want to do. There we go. And the reason we provide the name JML here, it's because remember earlier when I explained the VN effect command? The VN effect command automatically adds animation players to a bus node, and it then uses any animation player it can find. But we don't want the VNEffect command to use the JML players. The JML players have to remain available for JML animations. So this is why here we tell the dialog engine which players are the JML players, so the VNEffect command does not use them. So this is very important, okay? Make sure you don't overlook this, but normally you probably don't need to rename the JML players, so you don't really have a reason to modify this. Next, we need to set up our JML animations. And to do this, we use those 4 arrays here: VN join effect, move from effect, move to effect, and leave effect. So how does it work? Well, let's look at the join effect. We have 2 values here. If you hover on the VN join effect variable, you get a tooltip, and this tooltip will remind you how to set up the array. The array requires 2 values: the method to use and the value. So for method, you have 2 options: animation and tween, or a custom method that you could create. Now, if you use tween or custom, you will need to write your own code. By default, Candy Dialog Engine only supports animation. So let's write animation here. And we're going to do this for all 4 arrays. Okay. Next, for the value, we have to write which animation we want to play. Now, for join effect, we want to fade in. That means the bus node is going to start invisible, and it will slowly fade into becoming visible over half a second. Now, the join effect triggers when a character joins. And next we have the move effects. Move from triggers when we use the VN move command. Remember, the VN move command moves a character from one bus node to another. So move from, it triggers when a character leaves a node. So here we use fade out. We want the character to gradually become invisible. And then here we use fade in for move to. So when the character appears in the new node, it fades in from invisible to visible. And finally, we have the VN leave effect. And this one triggers when a character leaves the scene with the VN remove command. And here we want fade out again. Okay, now let's set up a dialog where a character is going to join, move, and then leave. So let's try it. See, notice how Nakoto faded in, and now she's gonna fade out, and she will fade back in slightly to the left. Look carefully. There we go. And now she's gonna fade out permanently as she leaves the scene. There you go. That's your JML effect. Now, one thing I want to mention is that all the JML animation players need to have the same animations. Otherwise, they won't be able to play the specified animations. But it's a lot of work if you remake all the animations manually inside each player. So you have 2 options. So first, what you could do, create all your animations inside one specific player. For example, this one, the first one. And then what I could do, I could simply copy the player that has the animations and paste it or duplicate it and the duplicates will have the animations as well. However, if I modify the animations or delete them or make more animations in the original, it will not necessarily update the other ones. So a better option is to simply start by creating some animations in a player, and then click the animation button, go to manage animations, and here at the top click this icon and select save as, or just new library, doesn't matter, and save an animation library. All these animations, save them as an animation library, and then you can go to any JML player and click the animation button again, manage animations, and then load the library like this. And now all your JML players share the same animation library. So if you make any changes to that library, all the animation players, the JML players, they all get the changes. They all get updated. Okay, so that's one option. But you need to be careful here, because when you assign a library to an animation player, the animation names change. For example, here it doesn't say fade in anymore. It says JML/fade in. And JML, that's the name of our animation library. It's not the name of the player. They're named the same, but here it says JML because that's the name of the animation library. And what does that mean? Well, it means that here, earlier I showed you write fade in. Well, in my case, I need to write JML/fade in. Okay, so yeah, this is important, okay? Just don't forget that. And also make sure that the JML player you create the animation library from, make sure you also load the library inside of it. Okay? Because if you forget to load the library for the original JML player, its animations will be called fade in or whatever. They won't have the JML/ thing. And that's going to be a problem, because here you have JML fade in, but inside the first player the animations will be fade in, not JML/fade in. So again, just to be clear, make sure you load the animation library in the first player as well, the one you create the library from. It's not automatic. Okay, so that's it for JML players. Also, one more thing, actually. If you go to your actors dictionary in the Candy database script, you should know that dictionary very well by now. You have those four keys here: VN join effect, VN move from effect, move to effect, leave effect. And here you can assign values to an actor exactly like we did here. So, for example, let's say I want Alice to have a custom join effect. I could write this, assuming that this is an actual animation in my JML library, of course. Okay, you need an animation by that name, and most likely I would name it like this, actually. Okay, but yeah, you can assign specific JML animations to different actors. They don't have to use the same animations as one another. So yeah, pretty cool like that. And well, another thing is here, if you go to your dialog UI, okay, this is the Candy UI, in the visual novel mode section, you also have VN join and so on, right? See, this is the Candy UI, you have these, and here you have your visual novel scene and you have these as well. So what's the difference? Well, if I configure this here, let's say in the Candy UI I configure this. Well, it's gonna use this animation for every visual novel scene. If I have multiple visual novel scenes, it will use this by default for the join effect. However, if your visual novel scene has a specified effect, the scene's effect takes priority. Okay, let me show you here. I'm going to configure fade out for the join effect in Candy UI. And here, for the visual novel scene, I'm going to delete this. Okay? So now, when Nakoto joins, she should fade out. She's going to start visible and she's going to become invisible. It's going to be the opposite. See? Nakoto faded out because that's the default for Candy UI. Now, if I reassign fade in for the visual novel scene, you will see that this setting, the scene setting, takes priority over the Candy UI. So let's try it. See, she faded in this time. And now let's test the actors dictionary. And well, I'm just going to copy this one, but I'm going to do fade out again. Okay, so for Nakoto, in the actors dictionary, fade out. And this should take priority over the visual novel scene. And look at that, she faded out again, because the actors dictionary takes priority over the scene. Okay, so keep the priority order in mind. First, the Candy UI. And the Candy UI settings are overwritten by the visual novel scene settings, and the scene settings are overwritten by the actors dictionary settings. In Candy Dialog Engine, when settings override one another, the most specific settings always have priority. The scene is more specific than the UI because the UI can have multiple visual novel scenes. So a specific scene is more specific than the UI. And an actor is more specific than the scene because the scene, this animation here, it works for any actor. It's not very specific. However, this here is very specific because it applies only to one actor. Okay, so I hope you understand the order of priority. It's always the same logic across Candy Dialog Engine. Now, I'm not going to show you how to write code for tween animations for JML. That's a little bit too advanced for this video. but you can read the documentation for information about this. And now let's talk about one last feature regarding the visual novel features, and that's the speaker highlights. In Candy Dialog Engine, in visual novel mode, you can use custom animations or effects to highlight the bust node of whoever is speaking. And we're gonna see how to do this. So, for highlights, select the root node of your visual novel scene, and then in the inspector you have this dictionary here, speaker highlight, and it contains some default options for highlighting the speaking character. The first two options, name tag and outline, are a little bit advanced. I'm going to tell you what they do, but I'm not going to explain how to set them up. You should read the documentation if you want to do that. Name tag displays a name tag near the speaker's bust. So basically, you would create a name tag, like a rich text label and maybe some kind of background or some kind of frame. And you would make the name tag a child of every bust node in your scene. And if you enable it, anytime a character speaks, the name tag for their bust appears. And you can place the name tag wherever you want. At the bottom, above the bust, in the middle, on the side of the bust, it doesn't matter. The point is, you have this option to display a name tag near the speaking character to draw attention to them. Okay, next you have outline, and this is for displaying an outline around the speaking character, but you need a node for displaying an outline. An outline is an image, and you have to create that image. It's like a bust image, except it has an outline. And it gets displayed in a child node called outline. For example, a texture rectangle. And yeah, again, read the documentation to learn about outlines, but that's the idea. It displays a second image in an outline node, which is overlaid on top of the bust node. So yeah, read the documentation for this. Then you have scale, and well, yeah, scale is neat. It allows you to make the speaker's node bigger while the character speaks. And well, I can actually show you that one. The first thing is you need to enable scale, and then you can select a scale size, for example 1.1. Okay, and I'm just gonna make a dialog quickly that will show you how scale works, and this way you can see what it does for yourself. Okay, I just created a dialog off camera, and let's have a look. So we have Lena here appearing, and Kadeen is appearing, and notice when they talk, they change size. Now Lena is going to say something, and look at her, she's going to grow bigger, and Kadeen is going to shrink a little bit. There we go. It looks like, the way I set it up, it looks like Lena is moving closer to the camera and Kadeen is moving back. And now Kadeen is going to talk again, and notice the scale changing once again. There you go. So yeah, that's the scale highlight effect. It draws attention to whoever is speaking. Now you need to set up your bust nodes properly, position them properly, give them the right size, the right settings, and you need to select a good scale. Maybe 1.1 is too big. You might prefer 1.05, or if you think 1.1 is too small, you could go bigger. That's up to you. And next we have animation 1 as a speaker highlight option. If you enable it, it allows you to play an animation on the speakers node using this highlight player. Now I've created an animation that makes the speakers node slightly darker, and normally you would probably want to make the speaker brighter to attract attention. But just for the purpose of demonstration in this video, I made it darker so you can see the animation at work. Now, I need to provide here in animation name 1 the name of the animation that I want to play. And in my case, this is the name of my animation. So now let's just have a look here when we play the scene. So Lena is becoming darker when she speaks. And now Kadeen is darker when she speaks, and Lena returns to her normal color. So again, normally you would want the speaker to become brighter. In this case, I did the opposite, just so you could see the animation. Alright. Now, when you create animations here, you have to be careful about one thing. Make sure that it targets the root node. And when you hover the targeted node here, the tooltip, you may not see it very well, but there's a small tooltip with a dot. And if it displays a dot, it's correctly targeting the root node. And the reason it needs to target the root node is because the code is going to set the animation root to the speaker's node. So when Kadeen speaks, if she's on the node 4, it will set node 4 as the node, and it will set node 4 as the root, and the animation here will target node 4 correctly. Okay, so in order to make your animations target the root, you need to design them to target the parent of the animation player. So in my case, the parent is this node here, and I designed animations that modify this node, but in reality they really modify the root node. So if the code changes the root to another node, then that node will be the target of the animation. I know it might sound a little bit complicated. It's well, it's a Godot thing. It's how Godot handles animations. So if you want to learn more about this, if you're confused, read the Godot documentation or find some tutorials on animations in Godot. The important thing to remember here for Candy Dialog Engine is make sure your animations target the root. Don't worry about anything else. Candy Dialog Engine will change the root to the speaker's node when a character speaks. Okay. And just so you know, you can create more speaker highlight effects. You just need to do some modifications to the code here, the bustscene.gd script. I'm not going to explain this here, it's a bit advanced for this video, but yeah, if you don't like these effects, if you want to modify them slightly, you want to add more effects, you can absolutely do this. And you can also combine effects. You can activate all of the effects at the same time if you want, that's fine. So it's very flexible. But yes, it's not the easiest feature to use. It might not be very beginner friendly. But it's not that bad either, honestly. It could have been a lot worse, considering what this actually accomplishes and how much flexibility it gives you. Okay, and the last option here is billboard, and I won't show it to you because this is for Sprite 3D and animated Sprite 3D nodes, and my scene here is 2D. Sprite 3D nodes have the option to be displayed as a billboard. A Sprite 3D is a flat image, a 2D image in 3D space. And if you display it as a billboard, I can show you here in my 3D scene. Let me just add a Sprite 3D. Okay, and let me display, I don't know, let's see if this works. Yeah, there we go. See, here I'm displaying this image, this 2D image in 3D space, thanks to the Sprite 3D. And, well, there's an option somewhere, I just need to find it, to here, billboard. And look at the sprite right now. I can turn the camera around it. If I enable billboard, now the image is always facing the camera. See this? It's always facing the camera. And there's two options for the billboard. There's enabled and there's Y billboard. And if I select enabled, it's going to rotate along every axis. So if I move the camera vertically, the image continues facing the camera. But if I select Y billboard, the image only follows the camera horizontally, and if I move the camera vertically, the image doesn't look at the camera. Okay, so that's billboard mode. And here, you can enable billboard mode, and you have some options here. Right here, billboard on and billboard off. And this is asking, when the billboard comes on, that means when a character speaks, which mode should it use? Disabled, enabled, Y, or particles. And particles is something else, I'm not going to talk about it here. But you can select here what kind of billboard effect you want when a character speaks. Okay, you would probably want enabled or fixed Y. And then you can select which billboard effect you want when the character stops speaking. And you probably want to disable the billboard, but you can select any other option if you want to. Okay, and again, these two options, billboard on, billboard off, they only apply if you enable the billboard here in the speaker highlight dictionary. So if you disable it, these two options have no effect. Okay, so, I hope that gives you an idea of the speaker highlight options. And again, it's not the easiest thing to learn when you're beginning. And there's a ton of potential customization. You can program any kind of highlight behavior you want, so you can get very creative. You're not limited to these options. So yeah, it's very powerful. Now, one last thing I forgot to mention is how to configure speech bubbles inside visual novel scenes. Now, I discussed speech bubbles at the beginning of this video, and here I'm going to give you some information that is specific to visual novel mode. Now, it's actually very simple. All you need to do here is assign a speech bubble scene to each of your bus nodes. And as a reminder, you can find the speech bubbles here in your CandyD folder, scenes folder, and then you have either speech bubbles 2D or speech bubbles 3D. So just make sure every bus node has a speech bubble so it can display it. And you might also need to configure the offset of the bubble, because depending how you've configured your bus nodes, and specifically where the anchor point of the bus node is, your speech bubbles might not be exactly where you want them. They might not be centered, they might be too low. So you can use the offset values here in the speech bubbles to fix this. Or if you're experienced enough, you might even be able to write code to adapt your speech bubbles dynamically to the size of the bus node and the image displayed inside of it. Because that's another thing you might need to account for. If your bus images have different sizes, your bus nodes could be resized depending how they're configured. And that could create some inconsistency in the way speech bubbles are displayed. In the future, we might add some features to solve this, but for now, you're gonna have to figure it out on your own. Now, aside from assigning speech bubbles to every bus node, there's one more thing you need to do. Make sure all your speech bubbles have the exact same name. That's very important. And then go to the root node of your bus scene. In this case, it's the bus node here. And right here, you have this exported variable, speech bubbles name. And write the name of your speech bubbles exactly how it is here. Okay? And this will help Candy Dialog Engine find the speech bubbles. So if the speech bubbles have different names from each other, or if you don't provide the correct name here, speech bubbles will not work. And of course, go back to your dialog UI scene, and in the dialog display, remember to select Bubbles Mode. There's a VN Bubbles Mode, but you don't have to select it. When you select Bubbles Mode, if Visual Novel Mode is enabled, Candy Dialog Engine will automatically switch to VN Bubbles. So VN Bubbles shows up in this list, but you never need to actually select it. You can simply use bubbles for consistency. And this way, if you decide to disable Visual Novel Mode, bubbles will still work. Now, you won't have a VN scene with bus nodes, because if Visual Novel Mode is disabled, Visual Novel commands stop working. But, you know, if your characters have 2D or 3D nodes in the game environment, they will be able to use bubbles. You can create games that can toggle Visual Novel Mode on and off as an option if you'd like. So yeah, make sure you select Bubbles Mode. And now, let me show you what it looks like. There we go. Now you can see here we have Lena appearing on screen, and she has a bubble. Now, you know, this is the default Candy Dialog Engine bubble. It's a very basic design, and it's very, very easy to customize to make it look better. It's not trying to look good, it's just trying to be functional out of the box. And again, watch the section on speech bubbles at the beginning of this video if you want to learn how to customize speech bubbles. Okay, so now I'm going to advance. Kadeen appears and she has a bubble. So yeah, you can see that the speech bubbles work. And let me just demonstrate what I was saying earlier about the offset. Notice how the speech bubbles were offset to the left of the bus nodes. So if I increase the X offset for every node, well, let's see what happens. There we go. Now the bubble is closer to being centered. or it might actually be centered exactly. It's a little bit hard to tell. So yeah, very easy. And of course the Y offset is going to position the bubbles higher or lower relative to the bus node. So yeah, that's all there is to know about using speech bubbles with visual novel scenes. That's it for the visual novel commands, at least the standard and the intermediate features. So yeah, hopefully this helps, and I hope you'll manage to make some really cool visual novels.